always seen the division. You go through that town and you're like, oh God, I hope Ferguson police don't stop me.
I hope the police don't stop me. Is the mostly white police department in Ferguson racist? Maybe. Maybe that's why there's been rioting. Maybe Michael Brown's death was just the tipping point. Spike Lee says in America there's a war on the black male.
Not just killing us. It's the educational system. It's the prison system. It's for these young black men growing up with no hope. So I think it's systematic.
There is a war on black boys in this country. In my opinion, there is a war on African American men.
A war? John McWhorter has written several books about race, like Crisis in Black America. Is there a war against black men?
No, there isn't. And that notion is theatrical. There's room for theater, but no, there is not a war against black men. However, there is a very serious problem. And what it is, you talk about my books. 15 years ago, I wondered why so many of my fellow black people seemed to think that being black was still as much of a burden as it had been in 1960. I genuinely didn't understand. I don't mean that I thought they were crazy. I thought, I don't feel that way. Racism feels to me like stepping in some gum sometimes. And there are these other people who've led lives I thought were similar to mine who seem to feel that nothing's really changed. I very quickly found out, and that's when I started writing these books, the problem is the police. The reason that so many people are given to saying things like there is a war against black men is because of a very real problem, which is the relationship between police forces and particularly young black men. That's what creates the feeling of us being under siege.
You cite 3 reasons for that.
The main reason that police end up flooding black communities so often such that you have interactions that lead to incidents like the one that murdered Mike Brown is the war on drugs. Most people don't think of it that way, but the simple fact of the matter is that if there were no war on drugs, the police would not have nearly as much reason to be in these neighborhoods. And this is the part that's harder to talk about, but like most such things is true, if you are a young black man growing up in a community like that, where the schools are bad, where all sorts of things are bad, it's not exactly the hardest thing to drift the wrong way. Now, one wrong way that you can drift is to sell drugs for a markup because they're illegal. You don't have to be an evil person to do that, and not everybody does it. But
big profits are tempting when you're young.
Yeah, and if you couldn't do that because drugs were legal, then you wouldn't have so many black men drifting into that in the first place, and therefore we would have a new racial situation in America. And that's not rhetoric. I think it is simple, solid truth. The war on drugs is what makes thugs, and the war on drugs is what brings cops into these neighborhoods to kill people in the first place.
And the equipment the SWAT teams have, which was meant for riots, now is mostly being used for drug raids.
Yeah, and if we didn't have a war on drugs, we wouldn't have to talk about the ethicality of it. It simply wouldn't be needed. It would solve so many problems.
But your second reason, racism. There is some racism.
Oh, certainly. Racism is part of America. It's part of humanity. It's part of the black American past. It's part of the black American present. It's part of the black American future. And in particular, if you're talking about a situation where a white cop and a young black man are in some sort of clinch of a situation, then certainly the racist sense that a black boy or man is more likely to be violent is going to come into play. That is not fair, but it's also true. But of course, the complexity...
It's not fair, but it's true?
Frankly, a lot of things that aren't fair are true. Now, what's important is that the reason that white cops feel this way is not because of how white people felt about slaves 200 years ago. There is a direct cause, which is that we have to face that black men do create a disproportionate amount of the homicides in this country. We can talk about what all the reasons for that are. Those reasons tie into racism, but that's still true. The stereotype comes from something real, but it does end up getting people killed.
To be suspicious.
Unfortunately, many police do have a reason to be suspicious. That doesn't mean that they should be killing people, however. But you know, John, I lack a certain amount of faith. I don't know how training can really address this sort of thing. I think we've kind of hit a wall on Ferguson, which is really the same thing as we went through with Sanford, Florida last year. Really, we've got to make it so that these boys don't encounter these cops nearly as often, so that the racism won't end up playing its part in a clinch. I don't think we can exterminate the racism with editorials. What we can do is get the cops out of the communities.
By ending the war on drugs. I mean, I would also add, when you talk about race and people's reactions, is it just skin color? I look at these pictures, and I see these two kids wearing hoodies and their pants low. If these were white kids, I'd be apprehensive looking at them. And I look at I see the kids leaving Catholic high schools in New York City. I help some pay tuition. Nobody's afraid of these kids if they have on a crisp white shirt.
Yeah.
And if they don't swagger when they, or whatever the word is.
Yeah, the move, yeah. All of that is not ideal. What it is a grand middle finger stuck up to authority. And in particular, when you're talking about the pants hanging low, the genealogy is pants in prison where you're not allowed to wear a belt. That is a kind of a gesture of solidarity to black boys and black men in prison.
Many of these kids don't know that. It's just the fashion.
Now, it started as that. Now, it's just a matter of what's in the water. It's like the way you pronounce things. It's the way that you happen to walk. You don't think about it. It's part of the culture. And I can guarantee you that dressing in a way that's designed to say F you to the world or to the man or to the cops is something that would ease away if we had one generation of black boys not growing up thinking of the cops as the enemy.
Thank you, John McWhorter. Next, how's the media doing? Have we covered Ferguson properly? And what did this Washington Post reporter do to make this cop so mad?
Stop videotaping. Let's grab our stuff and go. Let's go. You can move. Let's go. Move. Sir, please. Let's move. Let's move. Sir, let's move this way.